The most dangerous assumptions are the ones made before a single fact is verified. The downtown streets had already begun transforming hours before the president's scheduled arrival. Barricades lined the sidewalks. Uniformed officers managed traffic diversions, and federal advance teams quietly coordinated security checks that most people never noticed. Office workers paused outside coffee shops. Tourists raised their phones toward historic buildings, and local businesses prepared for an unusually busy afternoon. Everything appeared orderly, but beneath the calm surface, dozens of agencies were moving according to carefully synchronized plans that depended upon precision rather than attention. Standing near one intersection was a man who blended almost perfectly into the ordinary rhythm of the city. Hudson Bell, a 38-year-old black man with a muscular build, a neatly trimmed buzz cut, and a composed expression, wore a navy polo shirt, dark tactical pants, and a black sports watch. Nothing about his appearance suggested urgency. He simply observed traffic patterns while occasionally glancing toward the secured route ahead. To passing pedestrians, he looked like another professional waiting for someone to arrive. To those trained to recognize subtle awareness, however, every movement reflected quiet discipline. Hudson never appeared distracted. His eyes continuously evaluated entrances, rooftops, reflections in storefront windows, and changing pedestrian flow without attracting unnecessary attention. Less than 50 yards away, Officer Luke Price noticed him almost immediately. Luke was 31 years old, broad-shouldered, athletic, and confident, with an angular face framed by neatly cut dark blonde hair beneath his patrol cap. After several years on patrol, he trusted his instincts, sometimes more than procedure itself. Seeing one man remain near the restricted corridor while everyone else continued moving caught his attention. Luke stepped from his patrol vehicle and approached with measured confidence. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. "This area is under temporary security restrictions. May I ask what brings you here today?" Hudson turned calmly toward him. "I understand the restrictions, officer. I am a federal employee assigned to official duties." Luke waited for additional details, but none came. "Which agency?" he asked. Luke looked Hudson up and down before letting out a skeptical laugh. "You expect me to believe someone like you is protecting the president? Most people standing around here claiming to be federal usually are not." Hudson maintained steady eye contact. "I cannot discuss operational assignments in a public setting." The answer immediately increased Luke's suspicion instead of reducing it. "If you are working here officially, I need credentials." Hudson reached slowly toward his pocket and presented federal identification without sudden movement. Luke examined the credential carefully, recognizing that it belonged to a federal agency, yet several fields remained intentionally limited. The identification confirmed federal employment, but did not explain Hudson's assignment or authority to remain near the secured route. "This is not enough," Luke said firmly. "I need to know exactly why you are here." Hudson remained composed. "Certain federal responsibilities cannot be explained outside secure channels. Your dispatch can verify what is appropriate." Luke interpreted the response as avoidance rather than protocol. Nearby pedestrians gradually slowed their pace, noticing the conversation. One person quietly began recording from the sidewalk. Luke contacted dispatch and requested identity verification. Several long seconds passed before the dispatcher responded that the record required additional processing. Luke frowned. "Until I know who you really are, I cannot simply accept this." Hudson neither protested nor argued. "I understand your responsibility, officer. I only ask that you complete the verification before reaching conclusions." Luke believed hesitation created unnecessary risk. Following what he believed was the safest immediate course, he informed Hudson that he was being temporarily detained while identity verification continued and carefully applied handcuffs without resistance. Hudson calmly extended both wrists without resistance. Several bystanders exchanged uneasy looks. Someone quietly whispered, "He said he's federal." Luke ignored them and secured the handcuffs. Hudson complied completely, offering no physical or verbal opposition. The growing crowd exchanged uncertain glances as the afternoon air became noticeably quieter. Then dispatch returned with an unfamiliar tone that nobody at the intersection had expected. "Unit 12, the dispatcher said carefully, "we just received an encrypted federal verification request. They are asking you to repeat the subject's full name immediately." Hudson Bell remained perfectly still as the dispatcher repeated the request with unusual precision. Unit 12, confirm the subject's full name exactly as it appears on the credential. Officer Luke Price glanced down once more before responding. Hudson Bell, he answered clearly. The dispatcher did not acknowledge the name immediately. Instead, several long seconds passed in complete silence except for distant traffic being redirected away from the presidential route. Luke had requested thousands of routine database checks during his career, but he had never experienced a delay that felt quite like this one. The waiting itself seemed different, as though someone far beyond the local communications center had suddenly become involved. Hudson stood calmly with his hands secured, showing no frustration despite the curious stares gathering around him. A few pedestrians whispered among themselves while others quietly recorded from a respectful distance without interfering. Luke interpreted Hudson's composure as confidence built upon deception rather than professionalism. You understand how unusual this looks, Luke said. You are standing near a restricted route, carrying limited federal credentials, and refusing to explain why you are here. Hudson nodded slightly. I understand exactly how it looks. That is why verification exists. It protects both officers and the people they encounter. Luke folded his arms for a moment before speaking again. Verification would be easier if you answered simple questions. Hudson replied in the same calm voice. Some federal assignments cannot be discussed outside secure channels. That is not disrespect. That is procedure. Luke remained unconvinced. Before he could continue, another message came across the radio, but this one was directed toward dispatch rather than the patrol unit. The transmission was partially encrypted, and only fragments could be understood from Luke's portable speaker. He caught words like secure confirmation, restricted access, and federal authorization before the message abruptly ended. For the first time since the encounter began, Luke hesitated. The interruption did not prove Hudson was telling the truth, but it suggested this stop had reached beyond an ordinary identification check. Even so, Luke believed releasing someone before complete verification would be irresponsible. He decided to maintain the temporary detention while waiting for additional information. Hudson never challenged the decision. Instead, he quietly watched the intersections surrounding the secured corridor. His eyes briefly followed the movement of city maintenance vehicles removing final traffic barriers exactly according to schedule. Luke noticed the glance and asked, "Why are you watching the route?" Hudson answered without looking away, "Because timing matters today." The simple sentence lingered longer than Luke expected. Before either man could speak again, Sergeant Susan Bennett arrived in her patrol vehicle after hearing the developing radio traffic. A veteran supervisor with nearly 25 years of experience, she stepped out with calm confidence and immediately assessed the scene before approaching. Luke summarized the encounter, emphasizing the restricted credentials and incomplete verification. Bennett listened without interruption, then turned toward Hudson. "Sir, have you cooperated with every instruction given?" Hudson answered politely. "Yes, Sergeant." Bennett nodded before looking back at Luke. "Until dispatch completes verification, maintain professionalism and avoid unnecessary assumptions." Luke respected Bennett's experience, but remained convinced that caution justified his actions. "Sergeant, something about this situation does not add up." Bennett replied evenly. "That may be true, but incomplete information is not the same thing as dishonesty." As the words settled over the intersection, dispatch suddenly transmitted another update with unmistakable urgency. "Sergeant Bennett, stand by. We have just received a secure federal communication requesting that no further questioning take place until additional personnel arrive." Neither Luke nor Bennett had ever heard a local dispatch issue instructions quite like that before, and somewhere several miles away, a classified federal operations center had already begun searching for the one agent who had unexpectedly disappeared from the Presidential Protection Network. Several miles away, inside a temporary federal command center established for the president's visit, dozens of monitors displayed traffic feeds, protective assignments, and synchronized movement schedules that had been rehearsed for weeks. Every member of the Presidential Protective Division understood that success depended upon precision so complete that the public would never notice it. Hannah Carter, the White House Advance Coordinator, quietly reviewed the operational dashboard one final time before the motorcade departed. Each assigned protection agent appeared exactly where expected except for one unexpected gap that flashed briefly across her encrypted tracking display. Agent Hudson Bell had failed to check in at the next scheduled coordination point. Hannah frowned, believing it might simply be a communication delay, but a second system confirmation produced the same result. Hudson's secure device had stopped updating after his location intersected with the downtown security corridor. She immediately contacted the Protective Operations Desk. "Verify Agent Bell's status," she said calmly. "His operational sequence has stopped reporting." Within seconds, Special Agent Benjamin Pierce walked toward her workstation after receiving the notification. 45 years old, disciplined, and respected throughout the Presidential Protective Division, Benjamin rarely reacted emotionally, yet the missing update immediately captured his attention. He reviewed the encrypted records himself before asking one question. "Has Agent Bell missed any previous operational checkpoint?" Hannah answered without hesitation. "Never." The room became noticeably quieter as nearby analysts recognized the significance of that answer. Hudson had built a reputation for absolute reliability. If he was not where he was supposed to be, experienced professionals assumed there was a reason worth investigating. Benjamin immediately requested secure communication logs while another specialist checked local law enforcement databases for any unexpected public safety activity near Hudson's last confirmed location. Moments later, an encrypted coordination channel connected with the city's emergency communications center. The federal liaison asked a carefully worded question that revealed almost nothing. "Has any local agency recently detained or contacted an individual identifying himself as Hudson Bell?" The dispatcher hesitated before answering that an officer was currently conducting an identity verification involving someone with that name. Benjamin exchanged a brief glance with Hannah. Neither spoke for several seconds because both understood what that answer could mean. The investigation had not confirmed a mistake, but it had confirmed contact between local law enforcement and a presidential protection agent during an active security operation. Benjamin immediately authorized a response team to prepare for deployment. At the same time, the operational clock continued moving forward. Outside the command center, engines started as the presidential motorcade began leaving its secure staging location exactly according to schedule. Delaying a presidential movement required extraordinary circumstances, and none had yet been confirmed. Hannah quietly watched the digital countdown as every passing second narrowed the available options. Back at the downtown intersection, Sergeant Susan Bennett remained beside Officer Luke Price, while Hudson stood patiently, without complaint. Luke noticed that dispatch had stopped asking routine questions altogether. Instead, every new transmission seemed to occur on channels unavailable to ordinary patrol officers. Even Bennett admitted she had never experienced a verification process conducted with this level of federal coordination. Hudson finally spoke after several minutes of silence. "Sergeant, I understand everyone is doing their job. I only hope the information reaches you before the schedule reaches us." Bennett looked toward him thoughtfully, recognizing that his concern sounded less personal than operational. Before she could respond, dispatch transmitted another urgent message. "All units at the downtown security corridor, maintain your current location. Federal personnel are now responding directly to your scene." At that exact moment, inside the advancing presidential motorcade, one senior protection supervisor received a secure update, looked through the windshield toward the planned route ahead, and quietly instructed every vehicle behind him to prepare for a possible change in movement. The atmosphere around the downtown security corridor changed almost minute by minute as the city's carefully rehearsed preparations entered their final phase. Additional traffic officers redirected the last civilian vehicles away from the presidential route, while public works crews removed temporary barricades one section at a time. Helicopters could occasionally be heard in the distance, and the sidewalks gradually filled with spectators hoping to catch a brief glimpse of the presidential motorcade. Everything was unfolding according to schedule except for the quiet intersection where Hudson Bell still stood calmly beside Officer Luke Price and Sergeant Susan Bennett. Hudson remained fully cooperative despite the temporary handcuffs, his attention shifting only occasionally toward the secured avenue, where timing clearly mattered more to him than the growing crowd nearby. Luke noticed the repeated glances and interpreted them as growing anxiety. "If you are waiting for someone to solve this for you," he said, That is not how this works. Hudson looked at him with the same composed expression he had maintained since the encounter began. I am waiting for verification to reach the people who need it, he replied. Everything else will follow naturally. Luke remained convinced that caution justified every decision he had made. From his perspective, no responsible officer should simply accept unexplained federal credentials near a presidential security perimeter. Sergeant Bennett quietly observed both men without interrupting. Years of experience had taught her that calm behavior often revealed more than emotional reactions. Hudson had not argued once. He had not resisted instructions. He had not attempted to leave. His confidence appeared rooted in procedure rather than defiance, and that distinction became increasingly difficult for Bennett to ignore. Several moments later, dispatch transmitted another secure update directly to her portable radio. She stepped a few feet away to listen before returning with a noticeably more serious expression. Local units are instructed to preserve the current scene exactly as it is, she informed Luke. Federal personnel are responding, and they specifically requested that nothing change until they arrive. Luke frowned. Does dispatch know who this man actually is? Bennett answered honestly. They know more than we do, but they are not authorized to share it over an unsecured channel. Those words settled over the intersection with unexpected weight. Nearby spectators continued recording, unaware that multiple agencies were now coordinating behind the scenes. Hudson quietly closed his eyes for only a brief moment, almost as though mentally calculating the remaining minutes rather than worrying about himself. When he opened them again, he looked toward the empty avenue where the presidential route would soon pass. The schedule is becoming very tight, he said softly. Luke followed Hudson's gaze, but saw nothing unusual. To him, the street remained exactly as expected before a major government event. Yet somewhere beyond the visible checkpoints, encrypted communications were moving faster than anyone at the intersection could imagine. At the Federal Command Center, Special Agent Benjamin Pierce had already entered a response vehicle accompanied by several members of the Presidential Protective Division. Their destination had changed from a routine security checkpoint to Hudson's exact location. At nearly the same moment, the lead vehicle of the presidential motorcade received revised routing instructions through a secure communications channel. The change was small enough that spectators would never notice, but every trained protection agent immediately understood its significance. Back at the intersection, Luke finally heard something new. The distant sound of multiple large sport utility vehicles approached from a direction that had not been included in the published security route. They were moving with deliberate speed, escorted through controlled intersections without stopping. Bennett instinctively looked toward the approaching convoy while Hudson remained completely still. Seconds later, dispatch spoke one final sentence that caused every officer on scene to fall silent. Attention, all responding units. Federal protective vehicles are arriving now. Stand by for immediate command transfer. The sound of approaching engines grew louder until a convoy of black sport utility vehicles entered the secured intersection with unmistakable precision. Their emergency lights remained dark, yet every movement reflected disciplined coordination rather than urgency. Local officers instinctively stepped back as the vehicles came to a smooth stop exactly where dispatch had directed them. The doors opened almost simultaneously, and several professionally dressed federal agents exited with calm confidence, scanning the surroundings before focusing on the small group standing near the patrol vehicle. Leading them was Special Agent Benjamin Pierce, whose composed expression revealed neither panic nor anger. He walked directly towards Sergeant Susan Bennett, identified himself as a representative of the United States Secret Service, and requested a brief status update. Bennett summarized the encounter honestly, explaining that Officer Luke Price had initiated a temporary detention during an identity verification after Hudson Bell presented restricted federal credentials without discussing his operational assignment. Benjamin listened carefully without interrupting or criticizing anyone. When Bennett finished speaking, Benjamin turned his attention toward the man standing quietly in handcuffs. For the first time since arriving, his professional expression softened slightly. "Agent Bell," he said with calm respect, "we have been looking for you." The intersection became completely silent. Luke stared at Hudson, momentarily unsure whether he had heard the words correctly. Benjamin stepped closer and nodded politely toward Hudson before speaking again. Your communications interruption triggered an immediate continuity review. We are relieved to see you are safe. Hudson answered with the same measured tone he had maintained from the beginning. Local officers were completing verification. I remained fully cooperative. Benjamin gave a brief nod before turning back toward Bennett. Sergeant, thank you for maintaining the scene. We can now complete the verification through secure channels. Bennett immediately instructed Luke to remove the temporary restraints, and Luke complied without hesitation. Hudson quietly thanked him before calmly adjusting the sleeve of his navy polo shirt as though nothing more significant than an ordinary delay had occurred. Several spectators lowered their phones, sensing that the situation had transformed into something entirely different from what they first believed they were witnessing. Benjamin then presented secure federal identification directly to Bennett and privately confirmed Hudson's assignment through an encrypted credential verification process unavailable to local patrol systems. Every confirmation matched perfectly. Hudson Bell was an active special agent assigned to the Presidential Protective Division and had been operating under a restricted information protocol authorized for the day's security mission. Luke felt the weight of that reality settle heavily across the intersection. He realized Hudson had never claimed special treatment. He had only asked for verification before conclusions were reached. Benjamin finally addressed everyone present with quiet professionalism. Restricted credentials are designed to protect active operations while still allowing lawful verification. Agent Bell followed established protocol throughout this encounter. No accusation appeared in his voice, yet the statement carried undeniable significance. Bennett acknowledged the explanation with a respectful nod. Thank you, Agent Pierce. We appreciate the clarification. Before anyone could continue, another secure transmission arrived through Benjamin's encrypted earpiece. His expression changed almost imperceptibly as he listened. He looked briefly toward the secured avenue where the presidential route was expected to appear within minutes. Then he turned back toward Hudson. There has been one additional development, he said quietly. The president has been informed that a member of the Protective Division experienced an unexpected operational delay. Hudson's calm expression remained unchanged, but several nearby federal agents exchanged quick glances. Benjamin listened to one final sentence through his earpiece before looking toward the approaching roadway. The motorcade has just issued a revised movement order, he announced. It is coming here first. The intersection remained unusually quiet as every agency adjusted to the unexpected change in events. Local officers maintained the security perimeter while members of the United States Secret Service established a second layer of coordination without creating unnecessary attention. Spectators sensed that something important was unfolding, yet no one beyond the immediate scene understood why a routine detention had suddenly drawn the attention of federal protective personnel. Hudson Bell stood beside Special Agent Benjamin Pierce with the same calm professionalism that had defined every moment since the encounter began. He showed no frustration, no desire to embarrass anyone, and no interest in turning the situation into a public spectacle. Officer Luke Price watched silently from several feet away, replaying every decision he had made since approaching Hudson near the restricted corridor. The realization that Hudson had repeatedly encouraged verification rather than confrontation weighed heavily on him. Sergeant Susan Bennett quietly reviewed the sequence of events with Benjamin to ensure every detail had been accurately documented. Benjamin confirmed that Hudson's restricted credentials had functioned exactly as designed and explained that members of the Presidential Protective Division occasionally carried identification that intentionally limited operational details for security reasons. He emphasized that local officers had every right to verify identity, but that protected credentials required specialized confirmation procedures unavailable through ordinary patrol databases. Bennett acknowledged the explanation immediately. "We will preserve every record associated with this encounter," she said. Benjamin nodded appreciatively. "That will help everyone understand exactly what happened." Before anyone spoke again, a secure communication reached Benjamin through his encrypted earpiece. He listened carefully without interrupting the surrounding activity, then looked toward Hudson with a respectful expression. "The Protective Operations Center has directed that every available record from this encounter be preserved," he said. "Body camera footage, dispatch recordings, computer logs, and witness information will all become part of the official review. Luke heard those words clearly. Until that moment, he had hoped the incident might simply end after verification. Instead, he realized that every decision made at the intersection would now be examined through documented evidence rather than personal opinion. Hudson finally broke the silence with a calm observation that seemed directed toward everyone present rather than any individual. Procedures exist because assumptions can affect people in ways that evidence never should. His voice carried no anger. That quiet restraint made the sentence even more memorable. Bennett agreed with a slight nod. Verification protects officers as much as it protects the public. Benjamin looked toward both of them before adding, "That is exactly why the process matters." A nearby business owner approached respectfully and informed Bennett that the security cameras mounted above the storefront had captured the entire encounter from the moment Luke first approached Hudson. Bennett thanked the owner and immediately requested that the footage be preserved without alteration. She understood that independent video could provide valuable context alongside the official recordings already being collected. Luke watched as another important piece of evidence quietly became available, confirming that the review would rely upon facts rather than assumptions. Several minutes later, Dispatch transmitted another secure message confirming that professional standards and internal affairs had both been notified because the encounter involved protected federal personnel during an active presidential security operation. Benjamin acknowledged the update before turning toward Hudson once more. "Your assignment remains active," he said. Hudson answered with a simple nod. "Understood." In the distance, the sound of approaching engines gradually returned, but this time the rhythm was unmistakably different from the earlier federal convoy. Every experienced officer at the intersection recognized it immediately. The presidential motorcade was now only moments away, and according to the latest operational update, it was no longer passing through the intersection. It was preparing to stop. The lead Secret Service driver suddenly received an encrypted command: "Hold the convoy." Every vehicle immediately slowed. Agents looked at one another. That command had almost never been issued during an active presidential movement. Traffic froze. Local officers stared in disbelief. The downtown intersection fell completely silent. The low, synchronized sound of the approaching motorcade gradually filled the downtown corridor until every conversation at the intersection faded into silence. Uniformed officers instinctively straightened their posture, while Secret Service agents calmly repositioned themselves according to carefully rehearsed protective procedures. Within moments, the lead vehicle slowed, followed by the armored limousine at the center of the formation. The stop had not been scheduled on any public itinerary, yet every member of the protective detail adjusted with practiced precision. Spectators watched from behind established barriers, unsure why the presidential convoy had paused before reaching the official event location. Hudson Bell quietly stepped toward Benjamin Pierce, prepared to resume his assignment exactly as protocol required. Benjamin gave a slight nod that needed no explanation. Duty came before recognition. Officer Luke Price remained beside Sergeant Susan Bennett, his attention fixed on the convoy as he struggled to understand how a routine detention had become connected to one of the most secure operations in the country. Bennett spoke quietly without taking her eyes off the scene. "Remember this moment. Situations like this remind us why verification must always come before conclusions." Luke answered honestly, "I understand that now more than I did an hour ago." Before either officer could continue, a senior member of the Presidential Protective Division approached Benjamin with a secure communication device. Benjamin listened carefully, acknowledged the message, and then turned toward Hudson. "The President has requested a brief operational update before continuing the route," he said. Hudson accepted the information with the same calm expression that had never changed throughout the encounter. "Understood." He walked with Benjamin toward the protective perimeter while maintaining the professional pace expected during an active assignment. Every movement reflected routine procedure rather than ceremony. The brief exchange itself lasted only moments, but everyone nearby recognized its significance. Luke watched as Hudson was greeted not as a suspect or an outsider, but as a trusted colleague whose responsibilities had temporarily been interrupted. The realization settled more deeply than any criticism could have. No one had raised a voice against him. No one had attempted to embarrass him. The facts alone had completely transformed the situation. As Hudson concluded the operational discussion, Benjamin returned with him towards Sergeant Bennett and Luke. Agent Bell, one of the Secret Service agents responsible for the president's immediate protection, has been cleared to resume his protective responsibilities, Benjamin explained. The continuity plan has been restored without compromising the overall mission. Bennett thanked him for the clarification before offering Hudson a respectful nod. I appreciate your professionalism today. Hudson returned the gesture. Professionalism is easiest to maintain when everyone remains committed to the truth. Those simple words lingered over the intersection. Luke finally stepped forward. His voice remained steady, although noticeably quieter than before. Agent Bell, I appreciate your patience during the verification process. Hudson looked directly at him. Every officer has a responsibility to verify information. The challenge is making certain that assumptions never replace evidence. Luke nodded slowly, recognizing that the lesson extended far beyond the events of that morning. As the protective teams prepared to depart, the presidential limousine remained stationary for several unexpected seconds longer than anyone anticipated. Benjamin received another brief message through his earpiece, then glanced toward Hudson with an expression that suggested the morning's surprises were not yet finished. There has been one final request, he said quietly. The president would like to personally acknowledge the professionalism shown here before the motorcade continues. The agents immediately adjusted their positions, and the rear passenger door of the armored limousine began to open. The rear passenger door of the armored limousine opened only briefly before a senior White House staff member stepped out first, carefully confirming that the protective perimeter remained exactly as planned. The president did not leave the vehicle. Instead, the brief pause became an opportunity for a quiet operational acknowledgement rather than a public appearance, preserving both security and the day's schedule. Benjamin Pierce approached the vehicle, received several calm instructions, and returned toward the small group gathered at the intersection. His expression remained composed, but there was unmistakable respect in the way he looked toward Hudson Bell. The president has been fully informed about the interruption to today's operation, Benjamin said. The message is simple. The mission continues, and every agency involved is expected to learn from what happened rather than assign blame before the official review is complete. Sergeant Susan Bennett nodded immediately. The statement reflected exactly the kind of leadership she had hoped to hear. Officer Luke Price listened carefully, recognizing that no one was attempting to publicly criticize him despite the seriousness of the situation. The focus remained on facts, professionalism, and accountability. Hudson accepted the message with a quiet nod before asking only one question. Has the continuity schedule been restored? Benjamin answered without hesitation. Yes, every assignment has been successfully realigned. Hudson responded with visible relief, not because of his own circumstances, but because the protective operation itself had returned to normal. That reaction did not go unnoticed by Bennett. She realized that throughout the entire encounter, Hudson's greatest concern had never been his own inconvenience. His concern had always been the security mission entrusted to his team. Several nearby federal agents exchanged respectful glances, recognizing the same quiet dedication that had earned Hudson his reputation inside the protective division. Before the motorcade prepared to depart, Benjamin turned once more toward Luke and Bennett. Every agency represented here acted with the intention of protecting public safety, he said. The review will determine whether procedures can be improved. That is how professional organizations become stronger. Luke lowered his eyes briefly before answering. I understand. I will cooperate fully with every part of that review. Bennett placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder for only a moment. Learning from a difficult day is part of wearing the badge. Those words settled into Luke's mind more deeply than any formal lecture could have. As the final security checks concluded, Hudson received an updated encrypted device from another Secret Service agent, replacing the equipment that had temporarily gone offline during the detention. He reviewed the revised assignment, confirmed receipt, and immediately resumed his operational responsibilities without requesting special recognition or further discussion about what had happened. Watching him return directly to duty after everything that had occurred left a powerful impression on everyone present. The greatest demonstration of professionalism was not proving someone wrong. It was continuing to serve without resentment once the truth had been established. Moments later, the presidential motorcade began moving once again, disappearing smoothly along the secured route as spectators applauded without fully understanding the extraordinary sequence of events that had unfolded only minutes earlier. The intersection gradually returned to ordinary city activity, but the official process surrounding the incident had only begun. Within the hour, professional standards investigators confirmed that body camera recordings, dispatch audio, security camera footage, computer logs, and federal communication records had all been secured for a comprehensive review. Benjamin glanced toward Bennett before entering his vehicle. "When all of the evidence is examined together," he said quietly, "everyone will finally see the complete story." As the federal convoy departed behind the motorcade, Luke watched the last black sport utility vehicle disappear around the corner, unaware that the first findings from the official review would arrive much sooner than anyone expected. 3 weeks later, the official review reached its conclusion through the same principle that had guided the entire investigation from the beginning. Every available piece of evidence had been examined together, including body camera recordings, dispatch communications, independent security footage, federal coordination logs, and written statements from everyone involved. The findings revealed a situation shaped not by malice alone, but by incomplete assumptions, limited information, and the importance of discipline verification during high-security operations. The review determined that Officer Luke Price had possessed lawful authority to investigate unusual activity near the restricted presidential route, but it also concluded that several critical decisions had been influenced by conclusions formed before the available verification process had been fully exhausted. As a result, Luke received formal corrective action, additional procedural training regarding protected federal credentials, and mandatory instruction focused on unbiased decision-making and advanced interagency coordination. Sergeant Susan Bennett's supervision and insistence on preserving the integrity of the scene received positive recognition within the department because her actions ensured that the complete truth could later be established through evidence rather than conflicting memories. The recommendations from the review extended beyond individual accountability. Updated guidance was distributed throughout the department, emphasizing communication with federal partners whenever restricted credentials could not be immediately verified through ordinary patrol systems. Weeks later, those revised procedures were incorporated into regional training sessions attended by officers from neighboring jurisdictions, transforming one difficult encounter into an opportunity for broader institutional improvement. Hudson Bell never requested public recognition, disciplinary action beyond the official process, or personal attention from the media. After the incident, he returned to his responsibilities within the Presidential Protective Division exactly as he had before, continuing to perform the quiet work that most citizens would never see. When colleagues privately expressed admiration for the patience he had demonstrated throughout the encounter, Hudson answered with the same calm perspective that had guided him from the first moment. Professionalism is measured most clearly when emotions could easily replace judgment. That sentence quietly circulated throughout the Protective Division and was later quoted during an interagency training seminar discussing cooperation between local law enforcement and federal protective agencies. Officer Luke Price attended additional instruction with genuine commitment rather than resentment. During one practical exercise involving restricted federal identification, he surprised several instructors by explaining the lessons from his own experience with complete honesty. He encouraged younger officers to verify first, ask carefully, and recognize that confidence and cooperation should never be mistaken for deception without supporting evidence. His willingness to acknowledge mistakes became one of the strongest indicators that the review had achieved its intended purpose. Months later, Luke and Hudson unexpectedly crossed paths again during another coordinated security event. This time Luke recognized Hudson immediately, offered a respectful handshake, and thanked him once more for the dignity he had shown on the day everything went wrong. Hudson accepted the gesture with a quiet smile before reminding him that every professional receives opportunities to grow throughout a career. There was no bitterness between them because the truth had accomplished what anger never could. The encounter ended not with humiliation, but with mutual respect built upon accountability, evidence, and personal growth. The city eventually forgot the brief delay that had interrupted a presidential visit, But those who had stood at that downtown intersection remembered something far more important. A badge represents authority, but authority becomes worthy of public trust only when it remains humble enough to pause, verify, and follow the facts wherever they lead. On that ordinary morning, the greatest victory did not belong to the person wearing the badge or the person carrying the federal credential. It belonged to the quiet discipline of truth itself, because real justice does not arrive through assumptions. It arrives when evidence is finally allowed to speak. Luke watched the presidential motorcade disappear into the distance. Only then did he fully understand that the man he had handcuffed had been protecting the president all along.